Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I feel extremely grateful to be able to share this physical space with you guys, because a lot of the time it's cyber digital space and I can't really see you, but I can feel you, which is the same right now because it's just, I see these like blinding lights and it's just darkness, so it's almost like a cyberspace right now. But it's really amazing to have this. And in the spirit of that, because we're blessed to have this kind of time together, and to make sure that we use it in a way where we can help each other connect deeper, rather than distract from what we're here for. I'm going to ask that in the form of an ardas, we're going to just start with one more method, and if you don't know it, that's fine, you can just close your eyes and listen. And it was just to kind of help kind of bring that collective energy and kind of keep it going, because the Benjis really did, and I feel like, oh my god, yeah. We'll just close our eyes and hope for the best. Ik oankar Satnam Karta Purkh Nirbhav Nirvair Akal Murti Ajuni Saibam Gur Prasad Jap Adi Sach Jugad Sach Hai Sach Nanak Hosi Bhi Sach. Okay, so I'm feeling extremely vulnerable right now, and I feel the irony of me saying that while I'm here is that me being here partly stems from a conversation with Beneath Singh about the vulnerability of an artist. So Maharaj indeed works in very interesting ways. So the talk today is about everyday Sikhi and everyday art, but before we get into that, I want to take a moment to kind of just reflect. So in your own kind of mind space, if you can ask yourself this question, right? Are you a creative? So whether it's kind of professionally or as a hobby, in whatever way you think being a creative is. So just kind of give your mind a few seconds to think about that. Are you a creative? Okay, so whatever response that your mind gave to you, just hold on to that. And I personally feel, and most people here are probably Punjabi or Sikh, and even if you're not, that's totally cool, but as Sikhs especially, I think that we have such an extremely rich heritage in the arts, and it's so interwoven into the way we do things. If we think of just the bar side itself, right, as soon as you walk in, you've got live music in the form of Kirtan, you've got Kavi Shri Tadi, spoken word, you've got Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj themselves in the format of poetry, music again, it's oozing with creativity. So we've got that, which is it's profoundly kind of, it blows my mind how much we're kind of surrounded with that on a daily basis. And sometimes it's really easy to lose sight of that because we've grown up with it, and we're kind of so used to it, right? So with bearing that in mind in the context of that, I feel that all of us here are creatives, okay? Because even if you're not a Sikh and you're on some kind of spiritual path, to be a creative to me means, to me, the way I define it is the ability to be vulnerable, to say, I don't know something, right? Which is something that we do every time we go to Darbar. We go in front of Maharaj and we say, okay, I don't know, but I'm going to put my hands up, I surrender, I'm going to put my head down, and I'm going to pray that you work through me, or something greater works through me, and where I'm able to figure something out, and I'm able to make a little bit more sense of my existence, yeah? So in that context, I strongly believe that everybody here is a creative. And I'm also really trying hard for us to move away from the stigma that creativity is just practicing some kind of craft, like it's only limited to if you play an instrument, or if you do something with your hands or whatever. It's more than that. It's a mindset, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of processing, it's a way of life, much like Sikhi is a way of life. So one night, when I was feeling extremely vulnerable, as I am quite a lot, this is the night before an Amrit, and I'm at my cousin's house, and he's like this proper sci-fi geek. Geek in a good way, that's not I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. But he's there and he's drawing up all these graphs, and I'm just overwhelmed and I'm taking it all in. But there's this one certain graph that really kind of stood by me over the past 12 years, and it's probably made more sense over the past year. And it's this whole concept of when you kind of, I don't want to use the word enroll, but when you enroll or you maybe begin some kind of spiritual journey, There's this kind of expectation that you tick all the boxes, you do everything you need to do, you meditate, etc., and it's like a one-way ticket to enlightenment, right? And everything's great. And that might be the case for some of us. Some of us might be really lucky, and it might be really straightforward. But for most of us, for me especially, it's actually a lot more like the second graph, right? The reality of it is, it's actually a lot of up and downs. And one of the Benjis was mentioning the social media timeline, right? It's nothing like that. It's not just, your Sikhi isn't just when you're feeling really great, you're feeling really connected, you really feel like dwelling on Gurbani, you really feel like going to Guru Garden, doing everything that is deemed as Sikhi, right? It's just as much the bits that are low. When you're feeling really disconnected, you're really like riddled with doubt and fear, you feel like you've let go, and you feel like you're not a Sikh, or you're not resonating with any part of yourself, right? That is just as much as a Sikhi, because that darkness is probably when we do most of our growing, right? Why would we need a guru if we weren't in the darkness in the first place? If a guru is someone who takes us from darkness to light, then obviously we're in some kind of darkness, right? And in that kind of, bearing that graph in mind, I've seen a huge correlation between my art practice and my Sikhi, right? To the extent that over the years, as time has gone on, they've become more and more intertwined to the extent that I can't tell the difference anymore. So my art practice and my Sikhi practice are pretty much one and the same. Something I experience in my art practice will inform my Sikhi, and my Sikhi will inform my art. And I've kind of broken it down because we don't have a lot of time. I can't go over 12 years of a journey, that's too much. But I've broken it down to kind of five key areas, right, which we're going to kind of go through. But just hold it in your head that it's going to be, it's not that these 5 key areas are like, this is exploration, this is what the drowning feels like. You know, they overlap, and it's not black and white, and it's not linear. A lot like that graph, it's up and down, and there's something that's being added, there's something that's being taken away, and something's constantly being chiseled like a sculpture. Okay, so we'll start with the exploration, which is pretty much kind of, I guess, the top, one of the peaks of the graph, right? This is when things are going pretty well. And this is a project that we did at the university. It was my first year, and we were kind of just told to express fish in some kind of form and just explore that in some way. And when we were doing it, it was one of my favorite projects, and I was so obsessed with it. Like, I'm going to uni, I'm seeing like autumn leaves, and I'm like, oh, fish, fish. And everything I'm seeing my sister's suits, and I'm getting all together, ooh, fish. Like, everything was just fish. And I went to the fish market on the veg train, but it was like, wow, fish, smell. And it was amazing, right? And that kind of playful obsession is so important in our Sikhi as well, right? If we regard Guru Sahib themselves as the king of kings, right? Tum ho sab rajan ki raja, right? So there's that divine reverence, but at the same time, we are also their children, right? From Bharat, right? We're their kids. So that kind of, it's such an interesting relationship, right? Because there's that reverence, but at the same time, there's this kind of childlike wonder. And we see that a lot in the Sakhis of the Bhagats, like Bhagat Namdevji, right, where they're running after the dog, and they're like, the roti, it's not chopri, it's not buttered. They want to give because they see the form of God, or they realize that Dharma is in everything, right? The next is the subjective self. Okay, so to me, it's really important to study the self, because right? The whole point of it is to recognize that you are the light, you are one and the same. It's not so much that you're, well, I don't know if I can say this, because Benji was saying from a different perspective about the broken thing, but it's not so much that you're broken, but it's the illusion that you're broken, right? The illusion that you're disconnected, because we're all connected, we're all one. So I did this sketchbook. It was very loose. I'm just painting and just studying myself. So literally just stepping out of myself and just looking at myself. So this is Baljinder Kaur, because if you are the light, that means you're not the body. And if I can look at myself in that way, when you're sitting in meditation, you're not the thoughts, right? You're just studying the thoughts, you're just observing the thoughts, and you're not that. You're not that. So that's really important to me throughout my art practice, always bring it back to myself in that way. And sometimes it can be misconceived as vanity, but I think you have to focus on yourself, because that's the whole point, really. Faith and intuition. So sometimes I'll just have random ideas, and I think this is just something I was just sharing on Instagram as I went along. And it was, I wrote a few thoughts down, and I just did a little doodle with it, like a little picture, and then I wrote another few thoughts down, and it was kind of manifesting as it went along. But the whole point was, if I had in that 1 second of a moment, it was the option of, do I follow this intuition through, or do I just leave it and like kind of go off with some other thoughts, right? And the Gurbani Panti has gone off in my head at the moment, but it translates along the lines of, if there is something good or productive, do it straight away. But if there is something bad, or something destructive or distraction, delay it as much as you can. And that's the same with an art practice, right? You have these thoughts and they come in and out, in and out. If there's something that you think, oh, there is potential here, then grab onto it, have the faith and follow it through. So we have the peak, and the exploration is great, but after all of that exploration, what happens is usually you kind of hit something, and I'll hit something that doesn't sit well with me, and I know I've got to deal with it in some way, and it's called the darkness, okay? So the darkness. So growing up, I had a really difficult time with myself. I think I've gone through several existential crises where I was like, who am I? What am I doing here? What is the reason? And in my early kind of teenagehood, I was really frustrated as a person, probably not outwardly, but in my head I was so frustrated. And if you've ever seen The Matrix, and you remember that line that Morpheus says to Neo, and he's like, it's like a splinter in my head, and it's always there, and it's just bugging me, and it was so difficult, but drawing and just doodling and whatever really helped me just recognize that there was a problem. And that was the key thing, just recognizing that there was something that is really not sitting well with me, and I've got to deal with it. And a lot of the time, we're not happy about something, it's really easy to kind of distract ourselves with other temporary kind of solutions. But for me, this was kind of recognizing that there's a deeper root, and there are some real things that I've got to deal with, existential crises. So after recognizing there's a problem, it took me a few years to finally give it a name, and I like to call it a moontil eclipse, or I'll say a mental kind of darkness. And to me, again, this is really important to be able to define it on my own terms, and some people will define, I don't want to go into the mental health thingy of it, because that's not really my genre. But for me, on my personal journey, I call it moontil eclipse, and it goes back to how the subjective self, you're able to step out of yourself and kind of see what's really going on. Like you have the sky, right, and you have clouds, right? And if you start defining yourself as the clouds and think that's your default self, then you've kind of lost your way along the lines of mantul super. And for me, it's really important to recognize that, okay, I'm a witness to this experience. This is not me, but I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to have to find my way through it. So this will keep happening every now and then, and it's part of the process. So after recognizing it, after giving it a name, I was able to start to sit with it. And sitting with it meant that if I'm crying my eyes out and I'm having really difficult times with myself, I have to sit down and I have to just work through it, just literally draw my way through it. So a lot of these were done when I was in a really bad place, which is quite recently, to be honest, but it's in and out, it's up and down. And this has taken years for me to do. And again, this links back to your Ret and your Nitrim, right? So a lot of the time, Benji was saying as well, how when you're in the deepest, darkest places is the last moment you want to do any type of simran, right? Because it's almost like your ego has its own kind of self-sustaining system, because you know that doing that will help it out of itself. The ego knows that, right? But it wants to prolong this kind of illusion as much as it can, so it will stop you from getting into that. And that's why I thought it's really important that we have this everyday listening, because even if you don't want to do it, you do it. You don't have a choice, because your mind can tell you whatever it wants to tell you. So just sitting down with it anyway, it doesn't matter how you're feeling, just sit with it and recognize it as not yourself, but you've got to deal with it, and having understanding through that. So through that kind of understanding, it really helps you to kind of process other things that are going on around you. And now the graph is starting to go off again because there's a little bit more understanding, there's a little bit more light. So these are quite old. So untangling an event, so these are personal events that were happening just around that time. One at the bottom was when I went away to study in Paris at an art school, and I was so homesick. I was like, oh, I hate it here, it's horrible. And one of the first things I did was, okay, I don't like how I'm feeling right now, but I want to project how I'd like to be feeling. And again, the Gurdwani book has gone out of my head, but it was about the ocean and the boatman all being one and the same, right? So there's nothing to miss if everything is one, right? And it was about just trying to project that. The top was it was like an Amrit Sanchar anniversary for me or something, and I was just reflecting on that. And the other day there was an event that happened in my hometown, and it was just to kind of help empower each other as women, or what our relationship with Maharaj was really about. Finding personal connection. So me and my husband, we really love independent theatre shows, and one we went to see was like a cool sci-fi. It's called The Thing from Over There. And it's really cool. And the next day, I woke up, and the first thing that I was doing, I was just writing words down, and it turned out to be a story about this sailor. He's kind of based on my husband, but he's cooler here. And that's a pipe, that's a bubble pipe, by the way, it's not tobacco. I had a few shots at me for that. Things don't smoke. So he's a sailor, and he's on this adventure of kind of going from the island of Satsang to there. So again, it was just contextualizing what I'd experienced, but through a Gurmukh lens. And again, it was about everyday experiences, something that might be perceived as this is a non-Sikh thing to do, or there's no spiritual kind of gain from that, but it's recognizing, well, the Guru speaks through everything, every experience that you're having. What is the Guru trying to tell me through this? What is the Guru trying to, teach me here, Because Guru Sahib is everything. So finding the personal connection. So I got married in 2015, and it's been quite interesting. Marriage is amazing, it's really beautiful, it's very challenging too, so a lot of hard work, because every single day you've got to wake up and look at your ego in the face and really grind against it. You see all of your flaws, so we have this kind of saying where it's like you can fool the whole world that you're the greatest, but your spouse knows that you can't fool them. They know all of your monsters, they know your darkness, they know everything about you, and you can't fool them every single day. So in that way it's a blessing, but when you're in such an intense relationship every day where you've got to do that kind of reflection and that kind of digging, it can be easy to kind of lose your way a bit and get into the kind of thing. So we started this sketchbook, and it's really cool, it's really interesting. So the top, where you can see where we've become arrogant mountains, and we had a terrible argument that day. We were on holiday as well, and we don't even remember what the argument was about, that's the thing. But again, I had to draw it out, I had to figure it out, and while I was doing it, I was reflecting on, well, what was the katha that day on the day around Knowledge, which was about forgiveness, sweet speech, humility, the 3 virtues, and reflecting on things like that. So this sketchbook helps me stay grounded and kind of always brings it back to, well, what is the purpose of our marriage? If there's a great purpose, then what are we working towards? The meditative. I don't know if I said that right. I thought I was putting too many T's. So processing, it's starting to go, the graph is starting to go up again. And this is probably one of my favorite times. And I did this project, it was a very spontaneous kind of online project, 100 days. Every day I'm grateful for something and expressing that gratitude in that thing. So one of my stars always used to say, if you ever meet anybody, do not focus on anything else apart from whatever virtue they have to offer you. And just take that virtue from them. So again, going back to Guru is in everything, so everything has something to teach us. So every day it was expressing some kind of gratitude to whatever mundane or ordinary object was in my life. And it was making me think, it made me think back to a gatha I had quite recently about biodiversity Baram, where they're talking about the Mother Earth, and there's so much vegetation, there's so many mountains, it's really heavy with all of these beautiful, beautiful creation. Mother Earth will never say that it's heavy, there's no weight. The only weight it will complain on is that of a girgan. And a girgan is someone who's ungrateful, someone who doesn't live a very conscious lifestyle, because someone who doesn't live a very conscious lifestyle is more likely to not make very great decisions and lead to problems like the problems we have now already with our Earth. So for me, gratitude as an everyday practice is really important, and doing this in a visual way was really helpful. Mindful archiving. So every time we go on holiday or wherever we go, so I always keep a sketchbook anyway, but I make sure I keep one while I'm traveling, because for me, just as your Sikhi doesn't ever switch off, it's a way of life. My art practice is a way of life. I don't switch it off even if I'm on holiday, even if it's a yatra. But this was amazing because all the people I sketched and drew. So this is the Hazur Sahib, bits of Delhi and Rambla Khera, and all the people I was drawing and putting in there, I remember. I can remember where I saw them. Sometimes I can remember the smells, but it was all a type of meditation, right? I could remember all these kind of beautiful details, and it was so much more than what it would have been if I hadn't have kind of archived it in that way. But it was about always being switched on, and it's kind of sometimes it's finding that fine line between being relaxed and getting lazy. You know, sometimes you go on holiday, you kind of think it's all dandy. I'm getting lost for words sometimes, so I'm just putting them in. But it's that finding that fine line, because as a Gursikh, you always go for right? You don't switch off. Present moment. So I always draw and sketch on public transport and public places because for me it's really important to just constantly practice and constantly draw, because if you're trying to get fluent in a language, and for me it's visual language, I have to be speaking it all the time. And last year I started to draw in the bars, like the bars and the gurukar and stuff. And at first I was a bit scared because I was like, the main thing for me is I don't want to distract anyone while I'm there. So I just draw them from the back, and I'm just usually sitting there and drawing. But it's been amazing. It's so different to drawing someone on public transport because, firstly, you're in the presence of the king, right, which just blows my mind anyway. And then, secondly, because it's a meditation for me, it's like, you know, if the room was dark, I wouldn't, just like that, basically, right? I wouldn't see anything. But there's only because there's light. I can see bits of the front row. I can see because there's light there that's kind of refracting off you guys, and I'm seeing certain shapes and tones, right? I'm not seeing a full person, but I can see there's a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that, and that's all I'm drawing, right? So when you're in Darbar, it's like the very literal experience of right? That in your I'm not going to translate that because I might get that wrong, but for me what that means is that. So look it up. It's in an unside. But it's basically everything's a refraction of light, right? Everything is you, everything is light, but when you're drawing, it's like the physical experience of that, and it's like a glimpse of what it might actually feel to be a completely God-conscious person one day. And for me, that's amazing, and it's such a gift to be able to experience that every now and then. It's not always, but for the few millionth of a second I might experience it from all the random sketches I do, it's so worth it. The discipline. So when you're on the meditative, it's kind of mostly that kind of trying to maintain that, and discipline is very important. So every day I draw or I make or I sketch or I do something that goes towards my creative practice. So just as we have Nithanim every single day, so sometimes I might give myself rules to kind of help spice it up a bit. And for me, social media is a way, by the way, to kind of help me keep discipline. That's how I use it as a tool. So if I upload on Instagram every day, that's just to help me keep my discipline up. Because all of a sudden I am accountable to you guys, the cyberspace, right? And my ego can't let me down. So, oh sorry boys, go back please, sorry. So for this project, every day I was like, okay Vali, you've got 45 minutes, you got to come up with a character, you got to make it, and boom, you got to post it. Okay. So I did that. So I did that every single day, right? And there were so many things that I started to explore that I wouldn't have otherwise. And I feel it's exactly the same with our red and the way we do things. So we've got our Qadar, and sometimes people can feel like that's very restrictive. But for me, it's very expansive, right? Because sometimes you've got certain guidelines in place. It actually helps you to explore so much deeper. So one of my most recent projects is 100 days, 100 faces, 100 lights. I can't remember actually. But what I called it something with a few sentences. And the biggest learning for me, because again it was very spontaneous, was like, I'm going to do 100 faces and I'm just going to do it, and I just uploaded it and I was like, yeah, I'll do this. But when I did it, a few days later I regretted it. I was like, why did I sign myself up to this? I've got so much of the work on. I can't commit because this is extra to the actual work that I've got to be doing. And the only thing that's really carried me through it, because of the theme, has been Sangat. Because every day someone will post something so profound that this is my light, or in some way, or this is my work and purpose, and I'm just taken aback and I'm like, wow, that is amazing. And so that has really helped me to keep my discipline up. So I'm going to kind of summarize, right? So in terms of what the journey, the key kind of things that I picked up from Sikhi and art intertwining. The first, I'd say, knowing that I am an active participant of life. Okay, so I know that because I'm observing life so much around me, I know that every single thing I'm doing is having some kind of consequence. Right, paying more attention. Right, I'm always looking, because it's really important that to draw you have to see. It's all about seeing. That's what the skill is there. Right, so it's always being diyal pratyal. And for me, being diyal pratyal means your mind is always there. It's always ready. Right. Meditating, Simran, right? The Simran for me is when I'm not thinking about myself anymore. And when I'm drawing, I'm meditating because I'm not thinking about myself. I am just in that moment, nothing else exists. Reflecting, it's constantly doing abhyas. I'm constantly reflecting on everything that I'm doing when I'm drawing or I'm sketching or whatever. Documenting personal growth, which I feel is so important, because if you go the up and down graph, right? When you're in those dark places is usually you start to question yourself the most. And I think the page from the zine where I probably felt a bit teary was when it was, I've been walking for so long, and what is the point? It feels so pointless, right? And that's so easy to think of when you're in that dark place. But if you document your journey as you go along, and I always write the date of my sketches and stuff, it puts it into perspective. Okay, I'm not where I want to be, but I'm where I need to be right now. And that's really important, because it gives you hope for the future, because you know how far you've traveled. You've been traveling for so long, and we think it's just this lifetime, but it's so much more than that. And when you put it into that context, it really gives you some hope. So I want to kind of just wrap up with this shabad, Bande Kaur Dil Har Roj, and for me, I think this summarizes what it means to have a creative spiritual practice all in one. I think Gurbani always encourages self-exploration, self-expression. Those are the two key things, I think, for me. And that Maharaj, the fact that Maharaj is saying, dude, right, you've got to reflect every single day, right? Har Roj, all the time. You've got to be reflecting, you've got to be digging deep. Na phir paresani mahi, that, or maybe I should translate it for myself, that there'll be no anxieties, because, when I was saying about sitting with your darkness, even though you're experiencing that, you're feeling sad or whatever you're feeling, you still know it's not you. So the type of anxiety is very different, because it's not anxiety, oh my God, I feel this way. It's, oh my God, Baljinder feels that way today. It's very different. And knowing that this world and this place that you're living in is very much like a fair, like a play. It's so temporary, it's so transient. You stop taking things so seriously, right? Everything that you're doing, you're putting stuff out there or whatever you're expressing, you're exploring, but it's sincere, it's genuine, it's coming from here, but it's not serious to the extent that this is your identity. It's just coming through you, right? And for me, I think that takes off so much weight from the question of, what am I going to do with all of this creativity? What am I going to do with this, right? Where am I going to go with this, right? That's so much weight and so much pressure to have. And I think instead it flips the question and it turns it to, okay, well, where is this creativity going to take me? And I think if we're fortunate enough in this lifetime, or whatever lifetime, we can only pray that the creativity takes us back to its original source, which is the ultimate creative power, the Vaheguru themselves.
One more round of applause. For all three amazing speakers, and I have to monitor the time too. So what we're going to do is we'll have a little conversation. I will try to keep my tons of questions to a minimum, but we'll just get the conversation started. We have two mics going around, one audience left, one audience right. If you put your hand up in the air, they will find you. If we can get the house lights up so we can see them. And if you get the mic, if you're so lucky, if we have time, you can ask Benji a question, unless we don't like the question, in which case I'll politely deflect it. That's why I'm here. I'm at such a loss, like such a loss. And I want to be careful here, just like to check my awkward saying self in this like narrative of course, to not try to filter anything too much. But so much of what you said resonated with me as with my Sikh practice and my art practice. But I feel like if I was neither of those things, this would be just as relevant because there's almost like a divinity to it, right? I mean, you rooted in Gurbani, which was amazing and beautiful, which makes it inherently divine. So my first question is, first of all, it's kind of weird. We look like we're on a helicopter, like we got these. My first question is, how did it feel when GNA Talks plagiarized your work in the first? So I'm going to do a GNA talk by Baljinder Kaur. Yeah, it was amazing. It was so amazing how your presentation called to Benji, your presentation called back, because GNA goes in one of those pictures and one of those 100 faces. That was beautiful and amazing. And really just like this incredible thread that we've had through for the night. But my first question really is, and I had another one up my sleeve as a backup, but this one really just came to me in that moment, is as an artist, as yourself, with your art practice, with you as a person, how did you feel, or how does it feel, when you see such a sincere resonance of your work in front of you, on the other side of the world?
So I started crying. I did. I got my shawl and I was like, oh my god. And then I got a tissue. That is how I felt. It was really surreal, to be honest, because I guess I've never seen that. I've never seen it outside of myself. I know what it meant to me, but to know how much it meant to you, I think it gave me, it made me feel more worth. Yeah, I'd say not me inherently, but it made the work that comes through me more worth, and it felt more beyond me than, it's not just me that did that. So I was really grateful to have that. So.
And I mean, from the sound of it, I think it was such a powerful moment. Like, again, it was just, there's so much sincerity to it. I mean, if you weren't here, or if you weren't here, your presentations probably would have been the exact same, right? There was no opportunistic kind of, let's plug each other's work. It was just a very sincere moment of sharing. And I love that. Shifting gears for a moment, because we've had the privilege, this isn't the first time we're talking. And we've had the privilege of having a few conversations. And one thing that's been coming up tonight a lot as well is and even just the way that this conference came together, it very much had this social media overarching elephant in the room, Ganesh in the room, I don't know. This overarching elephant in the room about social media. I mean, on two sides. One being that really so many people know all three of you and your work, and you've impacted so many lives because of social media. And you talked about social media being a tool for accountability or discipline, reinforcing discipline. In this age of marketing yourself as an artist, as a self-employed person, as a young Sikh woman, what are your trials and tribulations with social media, and what do you appreciate about it, and what about it is not the greatest?
So I have a really awkward relationship with social media. It's very on and off. It's like Ross and Rachel. Oh, it's terrible. There's so many breakups. But as time has gone on, it's getting healthier. So I think one of the Benjis mentioned, obviously, was the pros and cons to it. Podgy, could you rephrase your question, because I started to think about the water again. Sorry.
Take a sip and I'll say
that when you said it again?
So what about social media bothers you, and what about it do you find helpful?
What about it bothers me? Okay. I think at the moment, what bothers me is that there's not a lot of flexibility. I think it takes away from that. Well, what I'm seeing generally with younger artists, there's this focus on branding yourself and having to be a particular way, a particular style, and that really takes away from the exploration, which I feel is more important, the exploration in the process and the kind of freedom of that. But the great thing about it is, I think the top thing is just the connection, that you can connect to so many people just by doing that, and I think that's quite profound.
And I just want to follow up with one thing, but for now, if you have a question, please put your hand up now, and they'll start bringing the mics around. A follow-up to that is, have you found, can you think of any instances or like amounts of time where you found it to be like either a burden on your work or inherently helpful?
Yeah, well, when I first started posting on social media, I was caught illustration, and I found that quite a burden, and that's why I changed my name to Baljinder. I don't know how that was any better, but I think the feeling of I have to all of a sudden I'm representing all these people feels like a burden, because I feel like I'm only representing myself, and this is just my journey, and just because I have the name Kaur all of a sudden, because there's no one else, because other people aren't representing themselves, I have to be other people's voices. And I get that there's a responsibility with that, and I get how it's important as well, because you've got to see yourself in media and it's helpful. But for the artist, that's a huge thing, because it can become quite political in a way. You know, because anything, I remember actually hearing something by an artist, and I think they said, you know, you express something in your room and it's just you and that thing, but as soon as anybody sees it, it's it's some kind of political statement without you wanting it to be. So I think that's probably the tricky stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have our first people? First question at the front.
Okay, I can use them. My question is, so you talked a lot about how, like, the topic of your talk was Sikhi and art and how they're one and the same for you. Was there ever a time when you didn't feel one and the same? And I guess that question roots from, I feel like you're very blessed to have kind of your passion and your work interrelated with your Sikhi. And for other people, do you have any, like, not advice, but just like thoughts on how one can create that in their life in whatever they do?
Doing it every day. I know it seems like a really simple answer, but I think one of the main things we have in our Sikhi practice is that there is one thing that we will repeat. And for me, I think repetition for some people could be boredom, but for me it's depth, because every time you will find something deep, you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and it always means something different, because you're not the same person every single day. You're different every single moment. I'm not the same Baljinder Kaur I was a few months before I did the talk or whatever, right? And it's being able to let go and keep doing something every day, and it becomes so ingrained. It's just part of your life.
And I found the parallel that you drew between Nitin very interesting, where like there is like this expectation of yourself, and that you want to hold yourself to. That was great. Do we have the next question? Who's got the mic? If you have the mic, could you please stand up? Or just start talking, whichever. We don't need to see your face. See, if you got here earlier, you would have been in the front. There you go.
My question was that a couple of times in your talk, you kept like circling back to your subjective self. And I want to just like ask about, in reference to your Jivan, when you think about like your journey towards Maharaj, do you think that like that separation between like your Dunyavi self and your self that's trying to walk towards Maharaj, like do you think that's a necessity? And also, why did you find that like it was like a necessary component to your talk?
To talk about the subjective self.
Yeah.
I think I thought it was the most necessary. I don't know, does that make sense? I think that's the most important thing, because this journey is all about the I, this thing that I think I am, and removing that thing that I think that I am. So I think that's why it's the most important, and any practice I do, anything I do will always revolve around this I, because this Baljinder Kaur is experiencing that. I don't know how else to respond to that question, I'm sorry. Is that what you meant by your question? Sorry, Ben, you don't have a mic anymore. I took away your voice.
Just shout.
I'll shout. Sure. No, my question was also like, in regards to your Jivan towards Maharaj and your Jivan, like the Dunyavi Jivan, do you feel like there's like a duality there, or?
No, I think it's one and the same. To mindset, really, that's creating that duality. I think if you think back to Asaliwala, right, there's a whole section where it's like everything's Gula Raja, Gula Baja, right, everything's box, and then afterwards like everything's wonderful, right, and there's this shift, and nothing's really changed, it's just the perspective that's changed, right, everything is really the same, right, but, you know, I'm really bad at remembering Gurbani, but I always remember what it meant, which is a really bad habit. I'm going to work on that this year, actually. So thank you for that. And one is, so, you know, the diseased person will see everything as diseased, and the person that's happy or in a none will see everything as blissful. So it's that perspective. And that's what we're trying to shift.
And I think that was just a promise. So 2020, it'll be the hashtag 100-day challenge of learning one line of Gurbani, memorizing it every day. You know, post it on Instagram, and we'll all keep track of you. Perfect. We'll point out your mistakes. Next, do we have the next one over here? Yeah.
Hi Benji. So a lot of people had beautiful Sikhi-related questions. I wanted to ask you a question about the craft in particular. So a lot of people who practice a certain craft, whether that's painting, whether that's spoken word, I feel like some artists get to a point where it feels like the well has run dry, and it feels like there's like a blockage there, and nothing's coming out in terms of the creative process. Yeah. So have you ever encountered like a writer's block or a painter's block, and how have you overcome that?
Recently I haven't, but when I have in the past, it's an honest answer, I'll tell you the truth. I will do all the things I would do as a kid. I'll get a bowl of cereal and I'll watch some cartoons. It's true. I just let go, and I'd be a kid again, because your child is so innately in touch with that, and when you're back in touch with that, you remember what everything's about, and it's that innocence and that kind of carefree joy that I'm trying to tap back into. So it's been a while since I felt that way, but yeah, I get back in touch with that person that is always in touch with that. Yeah.
Cool. I don't want to make a joke about any one of your answers, but literally cartoons and cereal is my everyday.
Really? That's why you so.
I object to you calling me a child. It's okay. It's okay. Find a different place to stay today. Next question? Yeah.
What you're going to write, and how do you feel after you're done?
The quote I'm going to write, do you mean the story or the caption?
No, the picture.
The picture.
Which art you're going to do?
I don't really think about it too much. It depends. If I'm working on like a real project, because I have this distinction between things I share on social media, which is for me like sketchbook work, which is mostly like personal discipline that I'm trying to just practice, and then there's actual work, which is more thought out and it's careful. But let's talk about the things that you see, the pictures that you see. I don't think about them too much. They just come out, and it's just like, you know, when you're talking, you don't think too much about what you're saying. Well, you should. I don't. But it just flows naturally. It just comes. You know, when you're playing, you don't think too much. I'm going to play this game. It just comes. You're just playing, or you're dancing, or whatever in your mind. Okay, that's really bad analogy to use. Next. I don't know why I'm here right now.
Thank you, Ajit. That was also a wonderful answer. Yes, in the back.
Working? First of all, I'd like to thank all the GNA Sevadars for putting this amazing event, bringing all these 3 speakers, and the tech team, which never gets recognized. Sometimes it does. I'm not taking myself. That's okay. The question is, though, hopefully I'll try to put it nicely, but if it comes out wrong, apologize in advance. The question is that social media has become a big part of our soul. And as an artist, you do post a lot of stuff on social media. I'm wondering if you'll be able to live without social media or take it out, and would you be the same person, the same identity without social media?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll be honest, there's so many times that I want to be off it. My husband doesn't let me. Yeah. But I see why. I see why he doesn't let me, because I can see that the benefits are much greater than the cons. I personally feel like I could do without it, but I think that my rate of growth would decrease, because I was thinking about this morning, and we were thinking about when you put something outside of yourself, it's almost like you put it up to a mirror. In the same way, you know, when you're single, or when you're single, you're growing as a person. It's great. There's so much you learn about yourself. But when you're in a relationship, I think, well, I'm being biased here because of the type of relationship I have, but the rate of growth is kind of exponential, and you just zoom through things. And I feel in that way, social media is very helpful. But it's not like a competitive thing where you're trying to go really fast or whatnot. But yeah.
Is there an element of, sorry, go ahead.
If I had a choice, I wouldn't be on it. That's what I'm trying to say, yeah.
Is there an element of, because your social media game sounds very disciplined, right? And I'm wondering, is there ever a break from that norm in terms of like just wanting to provide accessibility, like to people, like there's something that resonates and you want to share it just for the sheer sake of sharing it, not for any discipline purposes. Is that ever a thing?
Yeah, I'd say that there is an element to that anyway. In terms of part of the discipline, it just becomes so natural. But I think especially hearing when people resonate with it, like with Benji, I get how the importance of sharing. Because at the end of the day, we're all just different versions of each other, right? These are all, I can either say these are all different Baljinder Kaurs, or these are all different heartbeats, or whatever, beneath things, experiencing through each other's eyes. What is it? There's this really cool quote I read the other day. The eye that I see God with is the same eye that God sees me with. It's one and the same. So I think social media, I know we have this thing on social media, these all these stigmas and stuff, but really it's just another tool. It's just another mirror, and it's convenient and it helps. I don't think we should take it too seriously. Yeah, that's all.
And you said a fantastic thing about, in your Jubilee Sound trivia about that, like where Baljinder came from. Because really, we've known you as Baljinder for years. Like, that's been your identity, but when it was just kind of like a throwaway for you, like it's kind of just blah, blah, blah. It was really interesting to read that, and kind of how that got lost in translation of class cyberspace. I think we have time for we have time for a solid 2 questions, maybe 3. Who's got the next one? Thank you for standing up.
My question is about the art. So Pai Veer Singh has given an advice to a writer in his poem, and it's something like this. I don't remember line to line, but he says that लिखण चाओ जी घूम गया ऐसा कुछ ना लिख जिसनों पढ़ के जग ते वधे पाप और दुख. And after that he goes like जे लिखण लगे हो तां ऐसा कुछ लिख जिसनों पढ़ के आदमी उठ जावे हाल नालों सुख विच भावें चुप. So he has said that we shouldn't try negative and spread negativity into the world, and we should write something or present something so that it should add value to the society or to the world. So what's your perspective on this? Because we have all ups and downs for darkness and light in our life, and as an artist, we try to put that into our art. So what's your views on this thing? That should we do that negative thing in our art, or?
I don't think anyone means to do it intentionally, but sometimes it's part of the process, and it comes out, and you have to go through the process to get to the light. So it's just as important. I feel they're just as important as each other. So I'm not saying go out there and be racist and say etc. But can I think about this question a little bit?
Should we call back to it?
Yeah,
We'll call back to it at the end. We'll take a couple more and call back to it.
This question is another one, like it's similar, that how do you validate your own work?
How do I validate my own work?
Yeah, like it's the right thing to do. This piece of work.
Oh,
like,
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really think about that too much. I don't. It's most of it is really personal, and I literally, it's like I'm vomiting out whatever that's coming through. And that, I guess it's that quote that I shared with Benji in that interview was something that I'm going to give credit to my husband now because he said it originally to me, sent it in a postcard. But he said, when all other thoughts and emotions are exhausted, then we come to remember the one. And for me, I'm just trying to exhaust every possible thought and emotion until I have nothing else to exhaust. And then I will get to what matters most, which is not me. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have to say, what I love so much about your art practice is how rooted it is in reflection. And I think in this, sometimes in the hunt to create product or to create image, or even to disseminate information, that often gets lost. And I love the fact that for you, it's like everything else just seems to be a byproduct of this journey of self. And I think that's so sincere, and I think it's so genuine, and in turn, because it's so sincere, because so generous. I know we talked about it once prior to you coming, and once again, that I've always used the word generous because I see so much community engagement with your art. But then when we talk about it, it's never like I want to engage with the community. It was really very much about a process of reflection and growth, and then I would call it that. That's your prerogative. And then as a byproduct, because it resonates with so many people, it becomes about engagement, and I love that. Do we have another question in the audience? Otherwise, I have several. There's no issues. Oh, yeah, we have a question right here. And we'll wait while you walk.
You just said that I am not the one that matters in your process. How do you not let that get you down?
I didn't mean it in a negative way, at least it's a perspective that what I mean is the I that thinks that I'm separate is not what matters, as in the I that separates me from thinking that we're all one. That is the I that we're trying to get rid of. And what matters is the essential, the jewel, the light, which is the real essence of us, of who we are and what we are as a collective and as an individual. That's what matters, and it's trying to get rid of the false I. That doesn't matter, because that's not the bit that's important. Yeah.
Any other questions? Going with this idea of daily practice, you've been here now since Thursday, so more than 48 hours. And you do travel across Europe a bit, being more than we traveled here.
Because of Brexit, we're trying to get it all in before.
Before the borders go up.
Yeah.
And so being now in Vancouver, have you found, being in a place that's so far from home, have you found any kind of disruption or excitement in that daily practice?
We haven't been out yet, because LinkedIn doesn't let us out too much yet. We've got to spend time with the family. No, just the jet lag, I've been a bit tired. But I was a bit nervous about the talk as well. It's probably the two things that have thrown me off, and I haven't flown as much as I'd like to in the past 2 days. But I think generally I find everything really exciting. So yesterday we went to the thrift store. We don't have those in the UK. My husband was amazed, he took photos of everything. But it generally, in the back of my mind, I did want to get my sketchbook, but I think I felt conscious that we were with others, Denise and his beautiful wife. that's probably the only thing, because when me and my husband travel alone, we have this understanding with each other that we kind of do our own thing and we're processing and we're observing in our own way and we're respectful of that, and we really take our time. Like we'll spend a whole day at a museum or whatever, but if we're around other people, I try and be polite, and maybe that's the only thing that I'll be conscious of. That other people's time is valuable.
Great. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. Do we want to revisit that, or do you need to meditate around it
What
more?
was it again, sorry?
I don't remember the question. Oh, putting negativity out.
Putting negativity out, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting one, right? Because I don't know. Maybe I'm coming from like an innocent approach, but I don't feel anyone sincerely ever puts negativity out. Everyone just puts out whatever understanding they have at that time. Right? Whatever understanding you have at that time is what you're going to express and what you're going through. And I think it's really important for everyone. When I was hearing Benji talk about her postpartum depression, right? I don't think that she was putting negativity out. It was really resonating with a lot of people here. I resonated with lots of it as well. And it was really important that we could connect to each other and know that, okay, all of us are going through this. And I think that's something I really have felt when I'm doing this 100 Faces project, when everyone's talking about their light. A lot of it actually involves a lot of darkness, and when I've been reading that, it's actually really empowering, because it's like, wow, so many of our experiences are so similar, and that's so powerful, because you realize that we're all literally just walking each other home, right? So I think that's amazing.
And that, I think a lot of, inadvertently, I think all three talks, because we did come off when we started GNA Talks as a 5x15 model, where it's just like, get 5 amazing ballistics, get them up on stage and let them be them for 15 minutes. But then the length grew and the number of speakers decreased, because we wanted to really get into more of like the nitty gritty of what those people did and what made them so amazing. But inadvertently, I think we did have a very important discussion through all the talks about stigma, right? Just because something is a difficult conversation doesn't make it necessarily a negative one. I think that's something that we've been grappling with as a community. I think that's something that the community at large grapples with, is when something becomes a difficult conversation, it gets painted as negative. And emotions that come out of that process, we associate with negativity, we associate with like perhaps the opposite of saintliness or virtue. And then we kind of end dialogue. But I think the amazing thing about tonight has been that we really have had an incredible dialogue in all ways, from Sangha to speaker, from speaker to speaker to speaker, and then of course insulting me. So thank you for all of that, including the insults. I hold them in my heart forever. And with that, one more round of applause for all three speakers, please.